Hey guys, and welcome to episode 3 of Develop Your Element Unplugged, the official podcast of Develop Your Element. And this week we're going to be covering burnout and insecurities, especially in the context of how our personalities manifest, how they show up when we are either burned out, drained, stressed, fatigued, and when we are insecure, how our insecurities make us use our personalities in a less kind way, where we tend to force things and have conflicts and not really connect with people, and we stop being our best selves when we are insecure or burned out. So in Develop Your Element, we always talk about this concept of regenerative spaces, how to recharge our inner battery, to basically have more control of our personality, have more flexibility, kindness, empathy, generosity, all those good things. But we also have to mention insecurities when we have these conversations. And we need to know how to identify when we're getting drained. You know, what are the triggers? What are the warning signs? So today we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm joined here by my mother, Berenice, and my sister, Itzel. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jannik. And so we're super excited to be here.
Yes.
And let's get into it.
Yes.
It's a very interesting debate because it's a great difference between being drained and not being yourself because you are so exhausted, and when insecurities drive you.
Yeah, no, we definitely do have to make that distinction between drained and insecure. And to sort of elaborate a little bit in case you haven't seen the other programs, when you're drained is when your battery's low. It's when little things or big things in life have been sucking your energy or taking up a lot of energy, and your battery's so low that you don't have the mental clarity, the flexibility, even the kindness that you would normally have, because you just aren't seeing that far beyond your own immediate needs. And insecurities go a level deeper than that, in the sense that we're more willing to be actively unkind when we're insecure. You know, when we're drained, it can happen because we just don't have the energy to see what someone else is going through, to see someone else's perspective. So miscommunications will happen a lot more. But when we're insecure, we're more willing to actively seek out certain conflicts or fuel certain conflicts, because we're fighting for our own needs at a different level. Like, we're in survival mode and we feel like there are not enough resources. There's not enough in life for everyone. So we have to fight for ourselves and defend ourselves.
Yeah, you know, when we're insecure, we enter a certain level of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can be desperation in terms of wanting to feel more successful. So we force our success and greatness on people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can be desperation for love, affection, and attention. So we might do certain dramas, act out, get into accidents, do different things just for attention. Mm-hmm. Basically, if we don't have enough confidence to realize that we can get it naturally, then we start forcing the things that we desire. And depending on our personalities and our goals, it becomes different things.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, when we are drained and when we're insecure, we start doing more destructive things.
Yeah.
And each personality has, you know, stronger challenges that they face, because they all have different instincts.
Yeah.
And for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, in Develop Your Element, we talk about personality theory, but not to put you in a box, not to limit you, not to define you. And we all are a mix of all the different personalities. But generally, the 1, 2, or 3 that are more natural for us, that are easier to operate in. So we talk about 6 different personalities. We're a mix of all the 6. But the ones that dominate are the ones that, when we're drained, sometimes they control us instead of us being in control of them.
Yeah.
And when we're regenerated, when we're at a better mental state, physical state, emotional state, we can take advantage of our abilities, our instincts, our nature in a very beautiful way.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is give you guys back a bit of control, but by no means limit you. And we always talk about how when we are regenerated, we also have more flexibility to be more empathetic, be more able to adapt into whatever personality is required. So there are many amazing introverts that are great public speakers and great salespeople and great entertainers and that transform when they're working in things they're passionate about. And there are many extroverts that can be great academics and great scientists. And, there are many people who step out of the mold, step out of the how shall I say, stereotypes, when they're regenerated and passionate. We always talk about when you're passionate, you have double battery. When you're regenerated, you have battery to work with. So we want to give you that knowledge, that awareness that you can step into what's required and not limit yourself to your personality. But when you are operating in your personality, it will show up much nicer, much more productive and positive when we deal with our insecurities and when we deal with our internal battery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they talk about self-sabotage, and sometimes we think we are working against us, but the truth is that you're just operating with a very low battery, or your insecurities are driving you. And that's why you don't know what happened. You act, and the repercussions, how do you say it?
Repercussions.
That word, go beyond what you expected and normally against you.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that because part of my personality is one that really likes to have fun and keep things very lighthearted. And so sometimes when things get really tense or serious, that's when I have that strong instinct of wanting to make a joke or say something silly because it's so tense and uncomfortable. I'm like, I need to do something to lighten the mood. But then to the other person, if I'm not aware of the other person's personality, needs, priorities in that moment, I can come across as dismissive, like I'm making a joke about the problem and I don't care about them or I don't care about the situation. And when I'm drained, it definitely comes out stronger. And when I'm insecure, I'll get more defensive about it. But when I'm not...
And then it escalates even
Yeah, and
further.
then it escalates. The other person feels hurt. I feel hurt. We all feel misunderstood. But if I'm not that insecure about it, if I'm confident in who I am and I'm confident about the relationship that I have with the other person, whatever it is, then I'm able to say, oh, I'm sorry, I deal with stress by joking sometimes. I didn't mean it in a dismissive way. I meant it to lighten the mood. And we can sort of move on and we can keep communicating. So the same thing will present itself very differently and we'll handle it very differently depending on our battery levels and our insecurities.
Yeah, and for those of you that haven't watched the first 2 episodes, I recommend you do because it will give you a lot of context. In the first episode, we talk about the basic personalities, the different elements within Develop Your Element, and a bit of the basic tools. And in the second one, we talk a lot about this concept of regenerative spaces. And today really is a continuation of that. Regenerative spaces is one of those tools we talk about in almost every episode because it's so essential to any area of your life. And the basics of regenerative spaces are finding the activities, the environments, the ideal level of social stimulus, and type of organization and structure or lack thereof that fills you with energy and or inner peace. Based on your mix of personalities, based on your goals, your interests, your passions. And we talk about how to diversify that as much as possible. We talk about 3 different types of regeneration. Active regeneration, which is actively seeking those stimulus, those activities, those environments. Passive regeneration, which is organizing the spaces where you spend most time so that just walking into that room or into that office or into that space is like, I can breathe now. And then finally proactive regeneration, which is doing all the things you already do, but in a way that stimulates your personalities a little bit more. Not adapting too much due to insecurities, but allowing yourself to be more true to yourself in the activities that you do so that they don't tire you out as much. And So we are gonna obviously be talking about how those things relate to our insecurities and our battery state again today. But what we have to make very, very clear is insecurities do go beyond that. Insecurities are things that we actively have to challenge ourselves to overcome. And sometimes we can get rid of fears, we can get rid of traumas. Sometimes we can diminish the effect they have on us. But at the end of the day, we are wired in a way that we have fears for a reason.
Yeah.
And fears can be positive or they can be negative. What do I mean by that? You don't want to necessarily eliminate all fears because fears are a biological reaction that we have to extend our survival rates and to make wise decisions sometimes, to do risk management. And some people maybe have too much risk management, some people have too little. But risk management is obviously a positive thing when handled within reason.
Yeah.
Now, what we want to see is that we don't paralyze ourselves due to fears or our insecurities. Because when we do that, things get frustrating because we end up draining ourselves by feeling stuck, feeling inadequate, and then we get into, it becomes a vicious cycle. So we do want to make sure to, something we always say, make the goals more important than the fears, and don't go crazy. Don't go crazy when you don't overcome all your fears, because I have been working personal development for years. This was created about 3 years ago, these tools. And I would be lying if I said I didn't have fears. I have fears just like everyone else. I think all humans have fears, insecurities, moments where they feel vulnerable. And it's in different areas of our lives, in different moments. When we are more tired, our fears amplify. When we're burned out, etc., it's going to amplify more. So we just have to be aware. We don't have to get rid of them totally. If we can, great. But we don't have to judge ourselves, because fears can be healthy. We just have to choose that something is more important than those fears.
Yeah, no, and I think that's one of the big traps in personal development sometimes, that, we see all these people that are like, oh, I have the answers to life. I have the solutions. I know how to be happy. I know how to be successful. And then it's so easy to judge ourselves for everything we feel we do wrong. And, oh no, I'm still afraid of this, or I'm still nervous in this situation. I still get nervous before speaking in public, or I still get nervous when asking someone on a date, or I still get nervous when I'm doing sales. And then we judge ourselves for that. And we start reinforcing our insecurities by judging ourselves, and then we're more drained, and then we mess up more, and then we judge ourselves more, and then we get more drained, and it becomes that vicious circle. So it's definitely important to accept that we're all going to have fears, anxieties, nervousness, and also realize that other people have that too. Some people hide it really well. In some people, we won't ever see it because it's in some other area of their life where we don't even know them. But even the most confident looking people around us, they have those moments of insecurities and fears. So it's okay to mess up.
No, and we've said it countless times, both on the podcast and in workshops. If we're not failing, if we're not being rejected, we're not innovating, and we're not stepping outside of a comfort zone. So we have to look at failure, we have to look at rejection as positive things that give us more experience, that help us level up, that help us become more agile, more capable in whatever it is we want. I mean, you don't go to a martial arts class and ask the teacher not to get hit. You don't go to the Olympics or you don't train for the Olympics with the idea of not getting injuries. You don't try to play, any sport you want to learn. You're going to get injuries at some point.
Well, you don't learn to walk if you don't fall a few times. You don't learn to speak if you don't make mistakes and stumble upon words. The idea is, seriously, if you really put your goal further and you make it more important, then it doesn't matter if you stumble upon words, if you fall, if you make mistakes. But you really have to do a conscious effort. But I think think also is identifying where are those fears, where are those insecurities, allow you to manage them better. Because when you're just in automatic, you really don't know what's going on. So starting to recognize when you are feeling insecure, when you're so exhausted that your battery is totally drained, is very important. It's like the basic step for you to get out of it or to overcome it.
Yeah, no, there's a certain level of self-awareness that you have to have if you want to overcome your insecurities. Because many times we don't even realize or acknowledge or accept or admit to ourselves that we have those insecurities, and then they control us.
Yeah, I mean, how many people do you know that when they're insecure, they act like they're so great and they put other people down to make themselves feel better? And sadly, some of those people don't realize that they're insecure.
Yeah.
And they don't realize like it's something that they do not at a conscious level. They do it in a reactive way to the situation to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
And it's something exactly. Being self-aware is one of the most important things to, doing any type of positive change in your life or having any type of impact. If you're self-aware, you're going to be much more in control.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about. Taking control of your life, not getting stuck and not losing yourselves. So how can you kind of create the dynamics, the life, the relationships, the careers that you desire based on your goals, your personalities, your aspirations, and sometimes that requires stepping out of comfort zones. So what we have to look at is what are the warning signs, and the warning signs for the different personalities and the warning signs in general. But if we start having less mental clarity, start having less patience, start having less empathy, start being more dramatic, if we start having more conflicts, if
or
we
want to hide,
or start hiding, locking ourselves in our rooms, or escaping or seeking excess attention, whenever we start getting into those situations, it's generally a sign that there's a problem, that there's something that is draining us, there's something that is stressing us, that there's something that is not ideal in our lives. And sometimes it can be our relationships that drain us, sometimes it can be our career, something within our workplace, sometimes it can be ourselves, that we rob ourselves of certain pleasures, certain activities that fuel us. And we have to be very open to exploring all the possibilities. Sometimes when it's other people, we justify their actions and sometimes we're not willing to see the reality of the situation. Sometimes when it's ourselves, we can lack self-awareness, or we can be scared of having self-awareness because there are people who are afraid of knowing, that prefer to,
be in denial.
be in denial.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly the word. So we have to kind of consciously choose to go through that process of identifying things. But it's very simple. Once you know these things, it's like, I am drained right now, or I'm insecure right now. That's why I'm snapping. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm saying this. That's why this is happening. That explains a lot. And then you can take control. And that's kind of what we encourage people to do, to take control in those moments. And, if we go through the elements briefly, if we start with the electric type, the most extroverted type, the most youthful, like Itzel was saying, when she on her electric side is feeling drained or sometimes insecure about how to manage her personality in an environment that requires more seriousness, that might trigger more silliness.
Yeah.
And the reality is that electric people in those moments can be amazing at lightening the mood in a positive way that works. But if they're drained and insecure, they don't know how to manage it. And sometimes their jokes go too far or are mistimed or are come across as insensitive. And that's kind of what we want to avoid. So that's one thing that can happen for electric people. But electric people also can become like this electricity that's just generating static everywhere and snapping at everyone. Bzz, 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 snap, 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 snap.
The thing is, they're very active people. Electric people need to move, they need social stimulus, they need novelty, they need change. So if they're in environments or situations where there isn't enough of that anxiety kicks in. So like, I need to move, I need to get out, I need to do something. And I remember, I used to suppress my electric side a lot growing up. And when I was in college, I started using it a little bit more with my friends at parties and things like that. But I still mostly identified as an introvert because a big part of my personality is introverted. So I would have these moments that I didn't understand. Like, I had a final paper that I needed to write. It was an hour before the due date, and I couldn't sit down and focus. And I'd be walking and pacing back and forth around the room in circles, going. And I was like, I have to get out all this energy. I have all this energy that I don't know what to do with, and I can't focus until I've walked it out. And that desperate need to move, to see people, to talk. And it almost feels like wanting to go wild in a way. Like, I want to be able to say and do whatever I want without any repercussions, without any consequences. And if you actually regenerate, you're not going to go that extreme.
Exactly.
But it feels like that in the moment when you're really drained. Like, I just want to do everything.
And also electric people are very impulsive. So holding that and controlling that gets more difficult.
Impulse control goes out of the window when they're drained. And while their impulsivity can be something very positive in the sense that they move very quickly, they're efficient, they can do multiple things very quickly and adapt to different environments with little notice, there's also the challenge that they face of not finishing things. So one thing that electric people are great at is starting things. One thing they're not so great at is finishing things. And the more drained they are, the more likely they are to get fed up and move on to something else. And if they're regenerated, they are going to have more focus to get to the finish line. They are going to have more stamina. They are gonna have the ability to manage their impulse controls and really manage their lack of impulse control and really make wiser decisions that take them to where they want to go, because they live very much in the moment. And while many electric people have great goals and ambitions, the here, the now, the immediate opportunity for adventure and fun sometimes kicks in and overrides. And that's where it's a warning sign if they're partying and adventuring every single day, every moment of the day, and not getting stuff done.
I think a big thing for electric people is FOMO, fear of missing out. If there's something fun going on somewhere else, they kind of want to be involved. So if you're having such strong fear of missing out that you can't achieve your goals, that you can't do the basic things you need to survive, that's a big warning sign. If it's a little bit of FOMO, that's probably normal. But you'll see like a little bit of FOMO normal, a little bit more, maybe you're a bit more drained, a little bit more, you're a bit more drained. And the higher that intensity of, I need to be involved, I need to be in all the fun things that are going on everywhere, the more of a warning sign it becomes.
No, it's we have to understand that every single personality has instincts, and those instincts amplify when they're drained, and when they're insecure, they will seek those instincts in a more forceful manner and a more frequent manner. When they're at a regenerated confident state, they will be able to do with less of that stimulus, less of those environments, less of those activities, and they'll be able to do it in a more I don't want to use the word calculated way, but in a more responsible, positive, productive, wholesome way.
Aware, because
conscious way,
yes, because they understand what could happen. It's when
Yeah.
you stop thinking about anything but just the instinct kicks in, that you are driven by your instincts. Just halfway through your battery, if you are half full, you already are more aware. Now, if you have a full battery, if you are really regenerated, it's much, much, much more easier to be aware of what you are creating and how you're feeling and what you are doing with those instincts and abilities.
Yeah, definitely. Like, with every personality, the more drained you are, the more you're controlled by those instincts that you have. And the more regenerate, it's like when you're not hungry. You don't have that desperation for, I can eat anything, it doesn't matter. But when you're really, really hungry and you go to the supermarket, what do? You buy absolutely everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, they say don't go shopping when you're hungry.
And that's what happens when you're drained. When you're really drained, you'll seek the regenerative stimulus from anywhere it comes from, and with really high intensity. Whereas if you're regenerated, you still enjoy those things, but you don't need them desperately.
I mean, it's like when you're insecure and you're willing to sleep with anyone just to feel attractive, and you might lower your standards in a way that is like, okay, that person and that situation is not someone that I might be compatible with or that I feel a connection with, but I'm going to force it just to get that fix. We like whenever we feel insecure or when we feel drained, we force activities. We don't filter and decide this is an intelligent choice or not. We just go for it to seek that activity. And I know when I'm insecure or when I'm drained, I do a lot of things to feel more successful, feel more productive, feel more impactful. And then maybe it's like, so that activity or that thing didn't really work out as the way I would have liked to. But I did it without as much planning. I did it without as much assessment of the situation. I just kind of went for it because I so desperately need certain stimulus. So,
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the next personality, which is your dominant personality, the fiery type. They seek out success, productivity, results, status, all these things. So when they're regenerated, it's great. They're natural leaders. They know how to move and how to inspire people. But when they start to get drained, it's exactly that. It's that I'm going to do things to feel more successful, even if in the long run it won't actually make me more successful.
No, I mean, my primary personality is fire, so that's why she felt there's a good segue, because when I started talking about this, it's really an example of fiery personality drain. Like when I feel insecure or when I am drained, I force productivity and I sit in front of the computer 20 hours a day and I try to work and I don't get anything done, but at least I feel like I'm being productive because I'm sitting in front of the computer, even though I could do more in 1 hour after being well rested and working on my insecurities and whatever. So yeah, it's a big problem because I mean, we see it also with political figures, politicians. There are many politicians who are fiery because fiery people have the confidence and sometimes the arrogance to feel like they can make the changes that are required. They like being in the spotlight. They like being natural leaders and such. But if they don't kind of feel confident, then they're going to force their greatness on people. Oh, yeah, I'm the greatest at this. I'm the greatest at this. I'm the best. I'm the greatest. I'm the best. And they kind of flex and they kind of enforce their greatness or their abilities, and many times it's because they don't quite believe it themselves. So they have to kind of
convince other people.
So that's what happens when it shows up with different personalities in different ways. But with fire, they will start compensating more. They might put other people down to make themselves feel better. They might force productivity. They might become more bossy instead of those kind of inspiring leaders. They might become more forceful, and they will enter in panic when things aren't advancing, and they might end up also being more explosive in terms and reactive instead of being, visionaries.
Yeah, because something that regenerates them is a good discussion.
Like a good debate.
a good debate. I mean, an intellectual debate for a fire person can be so stimulating. And I know because it's one of my personalities too. I love people. I can have a debate. But sometimes you get into arguments if you are so trained because you need that mental stimulation. And the only way to get it is by arguing. And often fiery people would get into arguments and they might not even care really, but they pretend and take a side just to be able to have that stimulus.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's probably a good moment to clarify because a lot of introverted personalities love intellectual debates and discussions as well. For fiery people, there's a different nuance in the sense that they like the challenge. They like the challenge of, I want to see if I can win this argument. I want to see if I can make the best argument. I want to see if I can convince the other person. So sometimes arguing something just out of the blue that they don't even care that much about, maybe even arguing a side they don't believe in, for the challenge of, hey, can I do this? Yeah. Is really exciting for fiery people. And that's where, as you said, when they get drained, sometimes they just argue for the sake of arguing.
Yeah, fiery people like to influence. Fiery people like to win. Fiery people like to have an impact. Fiery people like to flex and show off.
And be the first. I love being the first.
The first?
I like to be the first one arriving to a country, opening a new language, starting a new manual that nobody has ever...
Sure, they like moving things forward. They like being pioneers. They like... being at the front of innovation and impact and all that. And so going back to the conversation with fiery people, for example, when they're confident, they don't need to win.
Yeah.
No.
When they're confident, they can disconnect a little bit from the expectations of the outcome and can have a natural confidence and humility. Here's a distinction I want to make. There's a difference between humility and false modesty. Humility is being self-aware, being able to admit when you're wrong, also being able to celebrate your achievements, but being able to be self-aware.
Yeah.
False modesty is acting like you're less than what you are to receive praise and respect from people. A lot of fiery people get told during their lives that they are too arrogant, too show off, and sometimes that leads them into a false modesty. A false modesty is not nice. It's not genuine. It's not real. And it just drains the fiery person because they can't regenerate with their flexing. And if they're drained, then they're going to be less kind with people. So an ideal situation would be to develop enough confidence to be self-aware and to have humility.
Yeah.
And you can show off and be humble at the same time. If you do it in a way where you celebrate others, where you express gratitude. So, for example, in a leadership position, there's a fine line between, let's say I'm kind of celebrating an achievement. If I celebrate an achievement and take all credit and it's just me and no one else contributed and I'm the greatest, I'm the best and everyone else sucks, that's arrogance in a very insecure, drained, terrible package. If I go, great job, everyone. Thank you for all the support. We've done amazing. I couldn't have done this without you guys. Wow, this is a great achievement. then you're uplifting people. Then you're including people.
Yeah.
Then everyone wins.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between those two. And that's kind of what we want. We want to, allow you to celebrate things if you're fire, allow you to flex, allow you to have that impact and presence. But just don't forget to uplift people and don't forget to be self-aware.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we move on to the next personality, the aquatic type, they're very emotionally driven people. Not to say other people don't have emotions, but they make more decisions based on how they're feeling. They're very sentimental people. They're people who seek very deep connections with others. Whatever relationship they have, they want to bring it deeper. They want to bring it more intimate. And so when they're getting drained, you'll start to notice there's a bit more drama going on too. There's a bit more of that, texting very often, expecting a reply and feeling left out, feeling ignored if there's no reply, feeling like nobody loves you, like nobody sees you, like nobody's putting you first. That's a very common thing that aquatic people will start to feel when they're drained. Also responding more emotionally to things that might not be emotional in nature.
Yeah. Or taking things personal.
Taking things personal, I think, is also a big thing for...
Keep talking.
He's moving my hands.
Someone behind the scenes is just telling us that you can hear the little...
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, that was a very discreet... That didn't sidetrack anything at all. That was very discreet.
And also, the arguments, they would initiate arguments for a different reason. It's not for the intellectual stimulation and the winning part, or trying to convince somebody of something just for the fun of it. This is
to get attention.
Yeah. So it's a very different motivation.
Yeah, sometimes aquatic people will kind of fuel drama and fuel conflicts a little bit because they want that attention. And especially if they've grown up in environments where they didn't get a lot of attention unless they were sick, unless they got injured, unless they had some kind of problem, then they learn that and reinforce that even more. And it can become an instinct of, creating problems to get love from someone, to get that hug, to get those positive, kind, loving words. And that's the thing that we have to both unlearn and also regenerate in order to avoid.
The challenge that aquatic people face is they have such a strong need for emotional connection, love, affection, romantic, cutesy things. I mean, all those things are very regenerative for them. And when they live or spend time with people who have other personalities that have a harder time expressing emotions, harder time expressing feelings, they sometimes feel that those people don't care about them. And then they have kind of force those reactions, as you say, have conflicts just for the sake of receiving that love and affection. And that's the trend that we're kind of trying to show with the elements. The activity or the stimulus that personality most desires, they will find ways to force it instead of naturally achieving it. So when they're drained, they will force it out of desperation and need for it. When they're insecure, they will force it because they don't feel confident enough to think that someone will maybe love them and care for them and blah, blah, blah. So their insecurities will trigger that. And when we talk about insecurities versus drain state, today you're probably noticing a bit of a trend that they are very similar because they overlap a lot in a lot of things. And generally when we are more drained, we are more insecure. So there is a lot of overlap, but there are different nuances, right? So I don't know how much we'll get into the nuances in this program, but for example, let's talk about an aquatic type. An aquatic type that is drained but not insecure will do much less drama.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
An aquatic person who is insecure but is not drained will still do a lot of drama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So insecurities play a bigger role than drained or regenerated state. That said, regenerative activities can help snap aquatic people out of that drama, out of those feelings of insecurities, because the things that regenerate them, love and affection and expressions of emotions and things like that, spending time together, those things will alleviate their insecurities and will fill them with energy at the same time. So in today's program, we will be talking in kind of basic terms, best practices, and with a lot of overlap, but there is a very clear distinction. The same goes for the fiery people. With fiery people, when it comes to leadership, when they are drained, they're not going to put people down. They will only put people down when they're insecure. But when they're drained, they will force productivity and things like that they probably will. But there's nuances to be discussed. So I don't want to make people think that it's the exact same thing. They're two totally different things, but they just interconnect so well in the sense that things that are regenerative tend to help with insecurities and tend to help with battery levels. So that's why we will do it.
And could you say a little about electrics? How does it show when they are drained, and how does it show when they are insecure?
With electric people, when they're drained, they can't control their energy and their personality. So when they're drained, they will, how shall I say, force activities of high stimulus. They'll be impulsive. They will do a lot of things that they don't do enough risk management, and they might get into unhealthy situations. However, when they're insecure, the fear of missing out kicks in, and they might end up befriending people who are suboptimal and seeking their friendship and acceptance. They might kind of join groups and environments that sometimes can be toxic just for the sake of feeling part of the group. They will basically want to get into a group with more
high stimulus.
But also with more. They always like groups. They always like high stimulus environments with more people. But when they're insecure, they will want more to feel that sense of belonging.
Yeah.
They will want to feel more part of a group. And sometimes not. Like they'll fall into peer pressure more as well. They will be impulsive with peer pressure activities and do more irresponsible things that are inspired by other people. They also might, when they're insecure, this is a whole separate thing, but they might punish other people for having too much fun and things. If they feel that they're not allowed to, or if they can't, then they will start punishing people and judging other people for doing things that they feel that they can't. Judgments. I know a lot of electric people who are insecure because they've been told their whole lives that they shouldn't do that, sit still, act right, be a proper lady, whatever judgments they might have received. So when another person has more freedom to do things or more confidence while doing things that they don't allow themselves, then they might snap at those people. So that's another thing that we see. But insecurities, the reason why it can be a little challenging to talk about insecurities is they manifest differently in different individuals. Because it all depends on the source of insecurities. The source of insecurities can be abuse, it can be rejection, it can be failure, it can be their opinions about how they look, how they sound. It can be self-imposed, it can be imposed by others. So there are many variables, and when we talk about insecurities, that opens up, so many different conversations, so many discussions. But in general, those are kind of the trends I see with kind of multiple or many electric people.
And excessive risk taking.
Excessive risk taking, sure. I mean, it also depends what level of insecurities we're talking about. But there are people who are so insecure that they don't value their lives enough, and might be almost suicidal. Some people obviously are suicidal, but some people are get to a point in their life sometimes that they feel almost they don't feel alive unless they do very extreme things sometimes.
Yeah.
And that can be sometimes a problem. I understand that for electric people, they're going to feel more alive when they do adrenaline rushing things, but we don't want to get to the extreme that they need to depend on constant super high stimulus to feel alive. Obviously, they have to find other ways to diversify that. But yeah, so that's kind of a little sidebar that I wanted to clarify things, give you guys a little bit more context about the differences between being insecure and being drained and how they show up. So, returning to the elements, we were talking about aquatic types. I think we were almost wrapping up. Anything else that we missed?
They might have lots of highs and lows to be able to express all their feelings.
Sure.
So they have such a wide range of feelings. They want to experience them all, and the more drained or insecure they are, the more they will.
Highs and lows. Yeah, and that's a good point, because they like to separate and reconnect. I mean, it's like break up and make up sex, or doesn't even just have to be with sex, but they love breaking up and getting back together and feeling that rush and that high when they're insecure. They do that a lot. When they're not insecure, then they don't even want to lose the other person. But they certainly will seek opportunities of highs and lows.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe this is something we have never discussed before, so maybe I am putting you in a awkward position. But something I notice also is they will tell you a secret, like hook you into, let's come in a little corner and let's share this together, just you and me, and that excitement of adding it's a secret.
They have to feel that their connection with the other person is special, personal, and deep and profound. So yes, they will find different ways, but I'm not sure how that would relate to either. I wouldn't say it's not a thing of insecurity, nor is it something that they're drained, in the sense that that's just something they like to do, or as a whole, to create that depth in their connection.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think that it relates to either of the examples, but yes, it is.
Yeah, it's only if they're taking it to the level of holding it against you, then there are insecurities involved. Like if they're telling you secrets and they're using that against you and not letting you talk to other people or have other friends or blah, 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 because then they will tell your secrets or something like that. If they're using it against you or manipulating you with it, then yes, there are insecurities behind. But if it's just a little moment of like, hey, like, I just want to share this thing with you, don't tell anyone, and it's sort of a cute, sincere thing, that's very much part of their personality of wanting to share that special little moment. And you'll see aquatic people in a group space, like, they'll kind of pull someone aside a little bit and share something, talk a bit about their family or their childhood or their feelings, and that's part of who they are.
The funny thing is oftentimes it's not even a secret and everyone knows it. But they just do things to make those moments more special and more personal. And that's... They love personalized experiences, right? So that's what they seek to receive and also to give. Okay, so moving on to the earthly type, an ambiverted type leaning a little bit towards introverted. It can be a little harder to read them in that sense, because they focus so much on others and so little on themselves, that sometimes it's hard to read how they're feeling and where they're at, because when they're drained, they kind of shut down almost.
Yeah, they get
Like,
paralyzed.
They get
'cause-
paralyzed, not knowing what to do with everyone and everything and the situation, and overthinking the consequences and how everything can go wrong. And so you can see that part. Like, you can see if there's a decision that has to be made and they have a hard time making a decision,
Yeah.
then it means
No,
they're
definitely.
drained.
Yeah.
Or that they're insecure in terms of their ability to make everyone happy, which is a priority for them. So that's something that sometimes happens. If you as an earthly person start feeling that things are unfair because you have the burden of taking care of everyone, basically fixing everything for everyone, because you've kind of put yourself in that position because you like it at the same time, but at the same time sometimes you could use a little bit of extra support and help. If you start having those thoughts, that also is a sign that you're being overwhelmed and drained,
Yeah.
and sometimes insecure in the sense that you sometimes want a little more support and acknowledgement, and that's where your insecurities can come up.
I when I'm drained, I feel that I've been ignored, and I know it's because I'm shutting down now, but I didn't know it before I developed your element. So one of the things is I felt very ignored because exactly you're taking care of everyone. You don't do it to show you're doing it. You just do it because you can, because it's fun for you. But suddenly nobody pays attention to you and they take it for granted.
Yeah.
So it's a very fine line from doing it in a way that it excites you and it helps you, and when you do it too much and then you are taking the burden of the world.
Yeah, because another thing that will also happen with earthly people when they're drained is they'll have a higher need to help people.
Oh, yes. Oh,
So
that's not very
sometimes they
kind.
become
I've
very
done that.
stubborn and insistent about helping people. Like, do you need a blanket? Do you need food? Do you need more food? Do you need even more food?
Yeah.
Do you need something
How
to drink?
are you?
How
Tell
are
me.
you? Tell me. Like, share everything with me so I know how you're feeling, so I know how you're doing, so I know how I can help you. And sometimes for other people that gets uncomfortable. Because they're not asking, hey, would you like help?
Yeah.
Would you like support? They're sort of forcing that help and support on you.
They will exactly force being able to help people. The same way with all the types, they kind of force ideal level of stimulus. One of the ideal levels of stimulus for earthly people is helping people.
Yeah.
So they kind of force the helping people, and sometimes it's kind of
we missed that finesse of knowing when to do it and when not.
when
Yeah.
and what intensity
In what
and what
intensity.
approach and how to best help.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
become less efficient.
And then sometimes it's just so frustrating because you want to help and they won't want it, so you push more, or you give them too much space, depending how you function with your help, and it's counterproductive, But
Yeah.
but it's this feeling I need to help and I know how to help, so let me.
Yeah, and earthly people will kind of get down on themselves if the other person doesn't get better or look like they're getting better. Then they'll judge themselves and take the blame, like, I didn't help them correctly, so I have to help them a different way.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work either, I have to help them a different way.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
if that doesn't work either, I have to help them a different way. So they can overwhelm themselves with that. And I want to put this a little bit in perspective because I know it can be hard sometimes for earthly people to let go, let other people make mistakes, let other people have problems. But I can say for me, growing up with the two of you as, my mother and my older brother, both of them having an earthly side. I remember as a child and a teenager and much of my life just thinking, like, why won't they let me make my own mistakes?
No, you have to voice it.
I had to tell them outright, let me make my own mistakes.
It's lies, it's madness, it's not true.
No, let me say, when Itzel was learning how to walk, Jannik would not allow her to walk because she could fall down. So he would constantly be... Oh, sorry.
I would push her on the floor. It's like, she can fall, she can hurt herself, and I would push her down on the floor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So sometimes when you're helping too much and you're trying to protect people too much, you end up kind of putting them in a little box where you're patting it very softly, but it's still a little box.
But there's a strong need to do that. I know now that I do develop that is crazy, but in my ideal world, that's what I would do for everybody.
Yeah.
Put a lot of cotton around them, so they will never be hurt.
Yeah, the irony is, growing up, I always felt that I was not overprotective and I was the opposite because in many ways, I would kind of push her to have a more active life, take more risks.
That was your fire side.
On my fire side, I would kind of push her out of that kind of thing. But I didn't realize on my earthly side how much within that context I would still kind of overprotect. But
it's
it was
like, go out into the world, but, and then all the little padding
exactly,
and all the
because
advice.
it wasn't like
I think it's the same too.
Yeah.
it wasn't like, don't do this, don't do that, don't go out, don't. No, it's go out and do all these things, but then but be careful with this, be aware of this, and this can happen. So,
because we worry a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if other elements worry as much as
the next one, the airy type
airy types,
also
they
worries
also
a
worry.
lot.
and even metallic. So we overthink
More on
things.
the thing is, the more introverted you get, the more methodical and the more you're going to think before you act. So that also means more of a tendency to worry because you want to calculate the risks much more.
If you want to simplify things, extroverts, they act often before they think. Introverts, they think before they act, and sometimes they keep thinking and don't act.
And electric, fire are the most extroverts. Aquatic and earthly are ambiverts. And
a middle point, so they don't go to the extreme.
And airy and metallic, that we will talk shortly about them, they are introverts. But the first three, which are electric, fire, and aquatic, have more extroverted
instincts, impulses. They generally will be more impulsive. They will move faster. They will react more intensely to situations, whereas introverts, they will analyze, plan, do more risk management generally, and
you'll see more withdrawal when they're drained. Like they're more the type to retreat, have a bit more space, more alone time to think about things and reflect on things before acting. Like the three more introverted ones are the ones that tend more towards worrying, overthinking things, and so on.
And
I think the overthinking would be a sign that you are
getting drained.
Yes.
When you're overthinking, and to the point sometimes of being paralyzed, or just escaping in your thoughts, that shows that you are either drained or very insecure, depending the degree again.
And if we go into the next type, which is the airy type, that's such a big sign, and we don't notice it. I'm primarily airy. We don't always notice it because it's so normal for us. We've grown up this way. We've lived this way. But we worry about everything. We will think about and analyze everything. And the thing with airy people is they like to observe. They like to analyze. They like to understand how things work. And so they will try to understand things from different angles and different perspectives too. When they're getting drained, they take that to a bit more of an extreme and think about everything from every angle, try to imagine every possible outcome. Like, if I say this in this way, what are all the possible outcomes? Okay, if I say it in this other way, what are all the possible outcomes? Okay, then if I say it this other way, and like we keep trying to find the path of least resistance, like we keep trying to find what will generate the least conflict, what will generate the least pressure, the least drama, the least intensity. But when we're drained or insecure, we take that to the extreme of overwhelming ourselves and not actually getting to act on anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also my third element. I am primarily earthly, secondary, I'm not sure whether it's fire or airy. It's sort of nearly the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you are electric and...
I'm airy and electric.
Mainly airy and with sparks of electricity.
Yeah, and it can be fun to see how they interact sometimes, because my electric side likes to be really spontaneous and act without thinking about the consequences, just be free and in the moment, whereas my airy side really likes to think about the consequences first and really likes to plan ahead and really likes to think before acting. So sometimes they conflict with each other. And when I'm drained, before knowing about the elements, I wouldn't know how to regenerate. Yeah. Because I want to go out and I want to do all kinds of things to regenerate my electric side. But then my airy side is also drained and it's thinking about all the potential risks. And it's draining my electric side. And sometimes we do that to ourselves. You know, we'll use our elements against each other and drain ourselves. And you have to kind of stop for a moment and go, okay, what's something I can do that regenerates both of them a little bit, just so I get enough control over the situation. And then you can specify and like focus on the electric side, focus on the airy side, focus on whatever. But sometimes you have to look for that. Okay, what's the in-between? Like dance around in the house? Okay, low risk, but high movement. I'll do that.
No, for me, the way I see it when I'm very drained is that need I have to help people will show if I'm my fire is drained, then I will bulldoze everybody, trying to help. Okay, if I help a lot of people or this person really hard enough, I'm going to get the kick, which I don't. Or I give them so much space, I disappear because my airy side likes to have space.
Yeah.
So I disappear from their lives, and suddenly, what happened to Berenice? Where is she? Why is she not here? So when I notice that trend, I know, either my fire is super drained and I'm really pushing everybody too much, or my airy side is so drained that I'm giving them too much space and they feel abandoned.
Yeah. So this thing that was just mentioned, this is important because when we get drained or when we get insecurities and basically they affect our different personalities differently.
Yeah.
And we want to identify which part of my personality is most insecure and which part of my personality is most drained right now. Because I might be doing super well in one part of my personality. It might be very confident, very happy, very productive. Everything is good. And then another one might be totally insecure or totally drained. And our activities, our reactions, our impulses, they give us information of which side needs attention. So, and that's a lot of the point of today's podcast is, okay, so how does each one react when they're drained or when they're insecure, so that we know, okay, we need to stimulate this particular personality because we are a mix of the personalities, and it's a matter of, okay, I need to stimulate this one right now because if not, things will get ugly. Yeah. And
and they do.
And they do, or they definitely can. So moving on, we're still talking about airy.
Well, another sign that my airy side is drained is negative thoughts.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to get out of my comfort zone, I will be so unwilling to get out of my comfort zone that I become nearly, I don't know if paranoid, but my thoughts get darker and more negative, and I can't kicks in.
Yeah, because airy people like to do risk management. They like to understand how things work. They like to be able to predict responses and results from different situations and different actions. If suddenly you as an airy person are noticing all the results are negative, all the outcomes I can imagine are negative, everything that I'm thinking about is negative, then you're getting drained. Because an airy person at their best will see the possibilities, will see the options, will see the solutions. An airy person, when they're very, very drained, they don't see solutions, they don't see options. And that's when you have to kind of get out of your comfort zone and probably go a little bit more counterintuitive with your regeneration, because usually regeneration for an airy person means taking personal space to reflect, to think, to meditate on life and the situations in your life. But if you're getting to that point where you're getting really negative, it's hard to think your way out of it.
Exactly.
So whatever your other element is, you might need that one to kind of back you up and getting out of your comfort zone a bit, taking some kind of risk, doing something different from usual to kind of put yourself in an actual tangible situation where things probably don't turn out as bad as you thought. And that can help you get out of the negative.
Just getting out of the house, which can be very difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
But just getting out of the house and seeing people, talking with strangers, helps me a lot. But it can be very difficult. If I leave it too late, getting out, I really need a friend or somebody to say, get out.
Yeah, no. When I'm in that moment where I can't get out of the house because I'm so extremely drained, I'll put on happy music or watch a comedy on TV, like something where it's not a lot of effort on my part, but it starts showing me some positivity or something that's different from what I've been having in my head all that time to start getting out of it. And then you just kind of have to keep pushing to the next step and the next step until you get out of that little dark cloud that we sometimes get into.
Yeah, I mean, you'll very clearly see, I mean, with airy people, to kind of make it very simple, airy people, when they're drained, they will lock themselves in and disconnect themselves from social media sometimes, and they will start having more dark thoughts. Dark thoughts obviously amplified and influenced a lot by their insecurities. It's when they're drained, they don't necessarily go to dark thoughts. It's more a mix of being drained and being insecure. If they're not insecure and they're drained, they're just gonna, I need a little bit of space, I need to rest, blah blah. If they are insecure and not drained, they might not need as much physical space, but their mind might wander to very dark places, right? But it's a combination of the two that kind of creates that cocktail that is sadly relatively common with airy people. So we have to do certain things to, as any element, to snap out of those kind of lows. And for airy people, it can be a bigger challenge because they overthink things and they over-amplify the potential consequences. They are masters at over-amplifying potential consequences. So that they can learn a little bit from their electric friends.
And use your secondary or tertiary element to help you snap out of it. Definitely, for me, it's crucial because if not, I do get lost. Not recently, but in the before develop your element, I could spend weeks without getting out of the house. And now with apps and things like that, even the food can be delivered. So
it's very easy to lock yourself up nowadays.
And not go out. So...
Yeah, and the thing is, if once in a while you take that week off where you're not leaving the house, it's fine.
It's fine.
But
I
if it's
even do that and I'm not airy. So.
Yeah, but if it's very frequent and it's affecting your life, it's affecting your work or your relationships or your studies or whatever you're dedicating yourself to, that's when there's an issue. That's when you have
when it's impossible. It sometimes it's nearly like mission impossible, even to get out of the bed or go to the bathroom or just move from one space to the other. That's when the warning sign is like, hey, you need somebody to snap you out of it, or as Itzel says, start putting things that make you happier, change into positive frame of mind by watching things that make you laugh, silly things or whatever, to try to get out of it.
There has to be a different. Well, we have to kind of clarify something. There's a difference between deciding, I'm gonna take a week holiday and it will be a lazy week and without responsibilities and obligations, and I'll binge watch Netflix and do it as a celebration, as something fun and regenerative. There's a difference between that and then being locked in with depression or anxieties or insecurities or feelings of that kind of discourage you and remove kind of certain motivation to do certain things. And again, this is one of those nuances. I mean, you can be drained, but if you're not insecure, it's like, ooh, I'm gonna take a fun week. But the insecurities kick in, and let's face it, I mean, it's not just some of the things we talk about. Every single element can have different things. Some of the things we're talking about now for airy types, those we can certainly see in other types. But we just see it more frequently and more as a baseline for airy types, that they have certain instincts, and the instincts depend on their internal battery and their confidence. When we talk about internal batteries, not to overcomplicate things, over time with a podcast, we will add more and more nuances. One thing you'll learn about development over time is there are many nuances, because we don't want to be one size fits all. We don't want to ever limit you. But one of the nuances you have to understand is when we talk about batteries, internal batteries, it's an oversimplification in terms of it's how flexible and how much well-being we have and such. But we can be physically tired, but be emotionally recharged. We can be socially tired, but physically energized. I mean, so one thing we do talk about in developed development sometimes is we have like different types of batteries. And one of the things that happens for airy people and introverts in general is their social batteries are one of the first batteries to deplete. They deplete faster than an extrovert's social battery. So at a party, an introvert can enjoy a party, but their social battery will deplete much faster than an extrovert. In fact, an extrovert might get more energy at a party. Those are the nuances that we have to always talk about, but we don't want to bombard you with nuances in the beginning so that you don't get overwhelmed with too much information.
No, and I love to hide away. I love to take time off just for myself. But that regenerates me. That makes me feel better. I'm hiding, but like a treat to myself. Not hiding, stay everybody out. It's like, oh, I'm going to create this little bubble for me to regenerate. So that's the difference. If you are doing something that makes you feel better, long-term better, that charges your battery. If it just gives you that adrenaline or the hiding space or whatever, but you don't come out better, that means that that's not really regenerative for you.
And I mean, this is why it's so important to know which element needs attention, because, for example, what she just described works great for an airy person, but she also has earthly. I, having a lot of earthly side, I know for me, taking time for myself, doing things just for me, escaping, things like that, that drains me more than regenerates me, because I feel guilty, I feel wrong, I feel like I'm being selfish, and that's part of my insecurities as well. Obviously, my insecurities trigger that, but my instincts on my earthly side also influence that a lot. So yes, if I had less insecurities in terms of my sensation of responsibility for everyone, it would be easier for me to go disconnect, and I could probably disconnect in a way that regenerates me more. But certainly it is not the first, second, third, or fourth, or fifth thing I think of to regenerate my earthly side. So, that's a different conversation. There's a difference between finding the ideal stimulus and environment to regenerate you and taking an environment or a stimulus and making it more regenerative. So
that's where I bathed up for me, those the hiding and the regeneration for the earthly part.
And or to give context, earthly people, they do respond well to things that stimulate the senses, things that are traditionally relaxing,
things that smell good, things that look good, things that feel good, physically.
Yeah.
Are very regenerative for earthly people when they allow it to themselves.
But getting to that point of allowing it is a bigger challenge for earthly people. So we have to, but just kind of to mention one more of those little nuances things. It's when sometimes we can control our environments and seek the ideal environment, and sometimes we can't. And when we can't, we want to find how to influence that dynamic, that environment, so that it regenerates us more. So those are two different things, and you kind of need to explore both.
Yeah. And then we go to the metallic.
Yeah, for metallic people, you'll see when they're getting drained, they become less flexible. Because there are people that like structure. There are people who like efficiency, pragmatism, routine. There are people who like being able to predict what's going to happen. And unlike the airy type that will think just in order to understand everything from every angle, metallic people will think, but eventually with the goal of coming to some conclusion. They want to be efficient, so they want to eventually have a conclusion about, this product works best. This supermarket market has the best deal on this product. This is the good thing. This is the bad thing. This is the thing that's going to help me. This is the most comfortable shirt. They want to eventually come to a conclusion so that they can systematize certain parts of their life, so they don't have to think about that anymore, because they like thinking about intellectual things in depth, but they don't have the mental freedom to do that if they have to worry about where are my shoes or where did the blue belt go, things like that. So the more regenerated they are, the more flexible they will be. The more flexible they'll be to consider ideas that are outside of the conclusions they've already made. They'll be more flexible to new plans that are coming out of the blue. Whereas the more drained they are, the more rigid they'll get about that, the more tense they'll get about
Basically, one major difference between metallic people and airy people is metallic people, they have one plan.
Yeah.
They do everything possible to come up with the best, most precise, most ideal, efficient, well-calculated plan they can come up with. Mm-hmm. Airy types have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, all the way down to Z and beyond. And they are, generally speaking, more flexible, and they don't want to impose as much.
Yeah.
Metallic people, they do want to make sure that the wisest actions are being taken.
Yeah.
So
by everybody around them.
They can sometimes be a little bit forceful with their ideas,
opinions,
and opinions. And yes, when they're drained, they're less diplomatic, they're less flexible, they're more rigid, and you can tell. You present a new idea, and they go crazy. They get tense, they get reactive, they get defensive. They try to shut down that idea as fast as possible, because if they have to consider a whole new possibility, their mind goes crazy.
Because their ideas are kind of stacked onto each other in a certain way, and they're configured in a certain system. So if you change idea A, they have to reassess idea B, C, and D because they're connected to idea A.
Yeah.
And if you don't take that into account when you're talking to them, and if they're not regenerated enough to go through that process, it can be very overwhelming.
Oh, yeah. And they shut you down immediately. The more drained they are, they will say, no way. I have thought about it. You are not changing my plans. There's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and sometimes they make premature, they come to
premature conclusions.
Okay, so it's okay. So they make premature conclusions. They basically sometimes don't have all the data to make an informed decision.
Mm-hmm. And they won't even hear. The more they are drained, the more they're insecure. They won't even consider something else.
Yeah. So basically, they need more context to make wiser decisions, and they need more context to not freak out when new ideas are presented. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we can influence that. We can help metallic people, giving them more context, understanding as to why their plan might be flawed. But you cannot go at them at their end like, well, it's suboptimal to go, your idea is flawed, because they've analyzed so many possibilities, thought of so many angles, that if you do that, it's like, it will affect them in a sense that they will feel insecure, they might feel inadequate, they might get defensive, and their insecurities might kick in because it's like my mathematical equation, or my logic, or my process, it was for nothing, or it didn't make sense, or what did I do wrong? But sometimes they won't even be willing to see that, because they come to conclusions sometimes when they see a trend. Yeah. And if they see a trend, there's like, that's the reality. And then there might be data and science to prove otherwise. And while they generally respond very well to data and science, if they've seen a trend, it's like, wow, that goes against everything I've seen. Yeah. And then there's a restructuring period in the mind. So yes, the more regenerated they are, the much more agile, mentally agile they are for those restructurings, those dealing with surprises, changes of plans. The more drained they are, any little change to the plan can throw them out of whack. Yeah. When it comes to providing feedback, when they're drained, they're going to be much less diplomatic, much less well calculated, but also less empathetic of the context and goals of the individual, and they will kind of force their way of doing things onto others. When they're regenerated, they'll be much more empathetic, understanding of the individual's goals, needs, situation, and will give much better advice, much better feedback. And when it comes to feedback and stuff like that, you'll see the more insecure they are, the more defensive they are going to get, the more reactive they're going to get, the more aggressive they're going to get when they're stubborn they're going to get when their ideas are challenged, or when they make a mistake. And the more confident they are, the much better they're going to receive feedback, and the much better they are going to be able to manage your conversation with opposing ideas, thoughts, idea generation, etc. But there are many things that go into that process for metallic people. But those are kind of the easiest things to see. They sometimes do some of the things that we associate with airy people. They sometimes will lock themselves up. They sometimes will isolate themselves. They sometimes will avoid responsibilities and things like that.
Particularly social responsibilities.
Social responsibilities. They're great at coming up with excuses as to why they cannot be at that party, or why they can't be at that social gathering, or in that meeting, or whatever.
Or family reunion.
Reunion. They will find escapes when they're drained and or insecure. Usually it's a mix between the two, in the sense that their social battery being low and their insecurities making them overthink things and draining themselves more, because it becomes a vicious cycle when they're overthinking their insecurities.
And they also might look like fire.
They have a lot in common. I mean, fiery people and metallic people, they both value logic, they value productivity, results, precision, impact. They value a lot of similar things. They just do it with very different intensities, types of processes. I mean, metallic people are generally more organized and more analytical in many ways than fiery people. Fiery people are socially have more social battery. They have a little bit easier time with the social responsibilities. But yes, there's a lot of overlap between the two. In many instincts.
If you feel you've been pushed or run over, it's probably a fiery person. If you feel like you've been cut, or stop dry, or how would you say, stop cold? That probably is a metallic.
A metallic person is great at coming with a very exact, precise wording explanation as to why something won't work, or why it's a bad idea, or why it's irresponsible. And a fiery person will push you with a lot of intensity and maybe bulldoze you if they're drained and insecure and forcing things. but yeah, that kind of covers the basics of the elements and how you can tell when they're drained and burned out and when they are insecure. These things we can talk about for hours and hours and hours and cover a lot of nuances, and over the course of the many programs we'll cover, we'll give you more nuances. But to recap the importance of this information, it's okay. If you want to be your best self, operate in a much more productive, kind, empathetic way, you have to be at a more regenerated state and you have to be more confident. How do you tackle it? Well, by regenerating what stimulates your personality and your goals and context better.
And that we discussed a lot in
episode 2 and episode 1 both cover this to some degree. And so I do recommend watching those if you haven't already. So regenerating is one thing. Another thing is making the goals more important than your fears. And we do have exercises to overcome different fears. We'll probably do a whole episode on fears at some point and overcoming fears, because that's a huge topic and we have many different tips and exercises and things. Right now in the beginning, what we try to do is give you guys a lot of context, a lot of basic tools, knowledge of how the different elements work, so that we can get into some more, deep conversations with nuances, with specific contexts, so that it's easier for you to apply in your lives based on your context. And anything you guys want to add in terms of burnout or insecurities?
Well, it's easier than you think to overcome them once you are regenerated.
Yes.
Once you have your full battery, insecurities become less
significant.
You don't get driven by your insecurities. So I recommend you watch episode 1 and 2 to really start finding your regenerative spaces, because it really is amazing the difference 15 minutes of your time can make in the long run. Seriously, just if you're airy, 15 minutes disconnecting. If you are electric, 15 minutes doing some movement or talking with a lot of people. 15 minutes for an earthly person. Taking care of yourself, which, as Jannik says, is sometimes so difficult for us. We'll give you that energy. We'll give you that confidence. We'll give you that peace and tranquility to really think things more carefully, even if you're spontaneous, or not to get lost on yourself or on your thoughts.
Yeah, and what I would say is really be willing to try different things that you didn't think off the bat would work for you. Because sometimes we do have aspects of our personalities that we're not really acknowledging, that maybe we have so many insecurities attached or rejections or traumas related to it that we haven't really been touching that part of our lives. And sometimes regenerating in a different way.
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly we're like, ooh, this is working. So being willing to take those risks, being willing to experiment a little bit and allow yourself to go through a process of, okay, maybe I don't know who I am. I know some things about myself, but maybe I don't know who I am. I'll try a bunch of different things and see what works. I think that can be really helpful, even for those of us who already are in a good place, who already are pretty self-aware, because there's always room for surprises.
Oh, I've been surprised, and I keep being surprised. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and also different, like the size of the issue and the depth of the issue will also affect the process. So if you're just a little bit drained, but you're like at 90% battery, it's going to be a very different process from if you're at 0% battery and you have a bunch of insecurities and you're struggling with other things. So allow yourself the process that's necessary for the situation. You know, don't expect necessarily a quick fix for everything, because sometimes you discover something, you're like, I have a little bit of an issue here, a little bit of an insecurity here. And when you start looking at it, sometimes you realize it's deeper than you thought. And sometimes it's really scary and you don't know what to do with it. But if you allow yourself a process of figuring it out, if you allow yourself a certain vulnerability with yourself of, okay, I don't have to be perfect through this process, I don't have to have all the answers from the beginning, then you can get through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and remember that when you're burned out or when you're insecure, you're going to burn way more bridges.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have way more conflict, way more drama, and you are going to have much less positive impact in whatever it is you do.
Yeah.
So be very careful not to make any life decisions, big decisions, important decisions when you're drained and insecure.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you make time to exactly both regenerate and work on your insecurities before doing something you regret. Because I think, I don't know about you, but for me, most of my regrets in life come from moments where I was either drained or insecure and I did something either too intense or miscalculated or forced or that just didn't have the impact that I desired. And that is very, very clear to me.
No, because you might have very good intentions,
Mm-hmm.
but they backfire because you don't do it with the right timing or the right finesse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, it's those small little nuances in your personality, whether it shows up in a positive way or in a destructive way.
Yeah.
So that covers everything for today's episode.
Thank
you very much for being here. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place. And if you want to hear it in your car, you can go onto SoundCloud or go onto www.developyourman.com/podcast. And there you can both see or hear the podcast. So see you next week.
Thank you so much.
See you next time.